Let's look now at the importance of civil society and the role that protest action plays in calling for justice in South Africa, with Not in My Name Secretary General Boitumelo Thage and Siphiwe Mathebula, who is spokesperson at Wolves, a civic group of men and women in the e-hailing sector who stand up against injustices. Good morning to the both of you, and thank you so much for being here.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right. Firstly, let's start with you, Boitumelo. I mean, can you share your thoughts on the recent protests and petitions calling for justice for Kwekwe?
Yes. Thank you very much for having us on your platform. I'm actually the national organizer of Not in My Name. But the reason why we went out in protest is because, I mean, for the past, I think, 10 years, there's been every single year a young girl or young boy raped, killed, beaten, sodomized. So the reason why in the past week or so we've been calling and protesting, in fact, we were at the Union building for, I think, 4 days this past week. So it's in relation to the fact that we're realizing that government is not doing anything. I mean, there's a funding from government for gender-based violence, but we're not seeing the accountability, the responsibility from government. We're not seeing sexual harassment policies being implemented in basic education, in institutions of higher learning. And what we're calling for now is not promises anymore, because I think a lot of promises have been made. Right now, we want action, we want accountability, and we want somebody to take responsibility for what's happening.
Siphiwe, tell us about the work that you do at Wolves, and what is your stance around the hashtag Justice for Kwekwe?
Okay, so Wolves is an organization of Uber and Bolt drivers. So we initially started it in a sense of protecting us as the drivers against the injustices. However, we also saw it as a good way in which we can reach out to the society or community at large, right? In this case being the Justice for Kwekwe. So what we then did is we decided to spread awareness, right? Because it all starts with us. Because as much as everything that is happening, we are also men, we are fathers, we are brothers. And this is something that can happen to any of our family members. So we decided to take a stand. So what we did is we had a motorcade or a convoy just to spread awareness. We started it from FNB to Joburg to Soweto. And we just drove around, you know, with placards on our cars, standing there. And it was more on the lines of, we need to also start addressing things from the ground up, you know, like when we are standing up for injustices, the boy child is looking at us, and once we start, you know, implementing such ideas in their minds and they grow up with them, we're trying to really secure a much bigger future as well. And as Uber and Bolt drivers, there's always, you know, certain things that are associated with the rides and whatnot, but we are here to also say that anyone that enters into our vehicles, our motto is protect, hunt, and serve. So we are there to protect our customers as well.
All right.
You know, yeah.
So let's try and understand the issue a bit deeper. I mean, you do incredible work at Not in My Name, and you're exposed to a lot of child rape cases as well. What do you believe to be the root cause of child rape in South Africa, and how do you think this can be addressed?
I think there's a serious cancer, and I think he touched on it when he said we need to raise up the boy child to understand that, you know, they're not just living with females, but they need to respect women, right? And I think the realization now is that there's a generation, I'd like to put it loosely, of men that don't respect women. And I don't know if it's past trauma from, you know, being previously disadvantaged, but what we've realized is the fact that we need to educate both girl and boy children about the importance of not being touched in certain ways, so that they know. I mean, and it's an unfortunate thing that we need to teach children, you know, having an understanding that there's good touch, bad touch. But I think also more importantly, just educating our societies that safe spaces for children need to exist at home, at school, at church. I mean, the fact that even some of these things are happening even at church, you know, just educating society. And I think maybe even mothers need to be, you know, brought to having an understanding that the safety of their children is should be their priority, and not letting men into their homes that would not, you know, show love to their children. Because a lot of the times, a lot of the cases that we deal with, it's mothers who allow stepfathers or boyfriends to enter into that situation, not love on their children, but actually abuse, rape. And I mean, we've dealt with cases in Cullinan or in Mamelodi where stepfathers rape their children repeatedly for many years. So there's a serious, we need to sensitize society to the fact that children need to be children and not be allowed to be children and not be, victimized and sodomized and, raped.
Yeah. And Siphiwe, how do you think the culture of silence and complicity surrounding child rape can be broken, and what role do you think that civil society can play?
Look, I think one thing is we need to all be accountable, but we need to, as men and as public figures, we need to have, groups, discussions, to spread that awareness. So in our platform, we talk about such things, because sometimes there's always a stigma of, don't talk about it, it will, dampen the mood, or maybe we'll be judged as a family,
Yeah, and in some cases, families actually harbor their own because it's the brother, or, I know of a family that sent a child rapist away to another town instead of reporting him to the police. What do you think he's going to do when he gets to that town?
He's still going to continue the same behavior.
Exactly.
So that's why we're pushing a lot of accountability, right? And it starts with calling each other out. If you see something wrong, you need to speak on it, If it's something above you, report something, But it starts with the change of speaking out. And not just letting things be, because it doesn't really fix a problem. But then, as she said, it starts creating those monsters and, they end up affecting our community. And at the end of the day, it's not the responsibility of just the mothers, to protect the children. Us as the fathers and brothers as well, we are there, we are standing ground to say, no, that's enough. Yeah.
But what are your thoughts around the recently concluded case of Omotoso? I mean, there was so much petitioning, there was civil society raising their voices, only for these women to be failed by the courts.
For me, I think, and for Not In My Name as a whole, it was very disheartening, and exhausting, because, I think it was an 8-year-long trial, and for them to come out and say, oh no, he's acquitted, or whatever legal terms they want to pin it down on, I think that just takes us 10 steps back as gender-based violence activists or anti-gender-based violence activists. But at the same time, it also sends a message to other victims across the country that you're not safe, And I think for us, when such a high-profile case is left to say, no, the person can be released and is free to go, sends a message that even if you're at home and you want to step up, the justice system is likely to fail you. So I think that was on our part a message from the justice system saying that we don't care about victims. And I think that's very disheartening, but it's also very exhausting as gender-based violence activists, because how do we then go out in society and, try and get the confidence of these victims or of these community members to say, we will be with you, but the justice system is likely to fail. Yeah.
All right, Siphiwe, in your opinion, what's the most effective way that we can support and empower children?
Teach them very young. Just going back to what she mentioned with regards to have a safe space for your child, right? In a sense that I have a boy, he's 6, and I tell him that, should anyone touch you in any way, come to me, But also it's very important as parents to have a certain sense of reaction. If a child breaks a glass and you overreact, should anything bad happen to them, they might think I'm at fault or whatnot. So let's create safe spaces for our children where we allow them to make mistakes and just reach out and talk to us.
That's fantastic. And there's always been an assumption until now, I hope, that it's only girl children who are at risk when, both, girls and boys are at risk. And as a matter of fact, it's about taking it one step further. I love what you've just said, to say, if it's someone within our family and you're not comfortable coming to me, go to your teacher, go to your principal. You understand? Because we also forget that a lot of molestation happens within the home, and it could be the person under your roof. So let's talk about actions. I mean, what do you think that authorities such as the police should be doing?
I think 2019 or 2020, we went out to say, police the police. We ran a campaign that called out for policing the police, because we've realized that in terms of gender-based violence, the police system is not conducive for victims to go, one, open a case, as simple as opening a case. There's a lot of secondary victimization. There's a lot of, you stand in a long queue, and then when you get there, that you're asked, oh, they raped you, oh no. And they're not empathetic, they're not understanding. So we want to say to the police system, set up a private area where victims can go and speak to, even if it's a female police officer who is going to be empathetic. So we call for police to be more empathetic, especially to victims of gender-based violence. But moreover, I think another solution, especially for schools, is for teachers themselves, groundsmen, cleaners, if there's a cafeteria, the cafeteria ladies, to also be more empathetic, so that if a child can't open a case or can't speak to their parents at home, they have another, place to go, which would be the school area. So trying to find a way where we say children are safe at home or at school or wherever it is that they would find themselves. But lastly, it's also to say we've done research and we can account for the fact that schools don't have a sexual harassment policy. So if something happens to school, like in the case of Kwekwe, there is no sexual harassment policy that actually protects a child at school. But if a child falls off a monkey bars or whatever, the jungle gym, immediately teachers call parents and it's a whole, and then, oh no, we're sorry, this is how we did, first aid, as simple as that. But there is no sexual harassment policy. And I think that's the biggest problem. And that's why a lot of these kids just sit in their trauma and in their silence until they realize when they're in their teens that, oh no, but this actually happened to me. Yeah.
Now, Siphiwe, how do you think that we can ensure that victims of child rape receive the support that they deserve on the back of what Boitumelo has just said?
Look, let's make it very public that we are there to support, and handle it with that sensitivity, but also just be there and not judge, create safe spaces and just, have those. I think for the most part, it's not only for children. If we look at women in our age groups going under the exact same thing, let's put it out there. Let's have those numbers, even the people that they speak to, the counselors, there needs to be that sense of, support. Yeah.
Now, Boitumelo, a lot of money has been pumped into the fight against gender-based violence. Do you think that these resources are being adequately used?
I actually don't think so. And I say this because I think the fund came out in 2019 or so, but gender-based violence organizations, or non-profit organizations rather, are still underfunded, and they do a lot more work than governments. So that's why even when we started, I said there is funding, but we're not seeing where it's being used or utilized. We don't see the rape kits. Sometimes you get to a police station and there's no rape kit, or you get to a Tutuzela center. Tutuzela centers obviously have more support because they work with non-profit organizations, but we don't actually see where government has placed all of this money. And I think every year the president hosts a gender-based violence summit. I am not seeing personally the effect of that particular summit, number one. And number two, we're also not seeing, the intention behind it as well. Yeah.
There's a massive backlog as well when it comes to DNA. I mean, have we ever thought about why there isn't a separate division for DNA testing for victims of sexual assault?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of forensic scientist graduates who are sitting at home, but when you get to a police station, you're told, no, you must wait 6 months, 12 months for your DNA to come back. And when it does, oh no, like with the Kwekwe case, I mean, it's been about 4 or 5 months now. And now we're told all 3 of the suspects have, the DNA doesn't match. And that speaks to the backlog, that particular, I think it's 44% or so of cases, or even more.
And insanely, there's been recent report that, in fact, the principal has not submitted his DNA.
Yeah, it's the father and the caretaker, yes.
Yeah. Sure. Wow, guys, thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right. Well, not in my name, national organizer Boitumelo Thage and Siphiwe Mathebula, who is spokesperson at Wolves.